To make a contented slave, you must make a thoughtless one. It is necessary to darken his moral and mental vision and, as far as possible, to annihilate his power of reason. He must be able to detect no inconsistencies in slavery. The man that takes his earnings must be able to convince him that he has a perfect right to do so. It must not depend upon mere force. The slave must know no higher law than his master's will. The whole relationship must not only demonstrate to his mind its necessity, but its absolute rightfulness. Frederick Douglass. What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of The Quisha King Show. Let's get right into it. A documentary that has just been released called Quiet on the Set, The Dark Side of Kids TV was recently released, and it really kind of stirred up some things in me, along with Diddy, these allegations with him, and just my own personal experience in the music industry. So what we're going to talk about today is how sex has totally taken over America and has become a tremendous influence to our children and extremely harmful to society as a whole. If you follow my content, you know I've discussed Antonio Gramsci's idea of the long march through the institutions, where basically you take this slow, long way through the institutions and take them over and import communism. So we can see it in schools, we can see this in corporations, we see it with churches, we see it with the family. We see it in law, we see it in media, we see it everywhere. We know that I say we have been taken over by communism. And I want to take a look at the sex part of this. In an article in El American by Julio M. Schilling, he writes how Marxism inspired the over-sexualization of children in schools to destroy American society. So while Gramsci was very instrumental in this long march through the institution, Schilling writes, Gramsci was not the first to view education as an essential tool of perforation to foster communism. Acting as the education coordinator in 1919, George Lukács, in the short-lived Hungarian Soviet Republic, instilled sexual promiscuity education for children at the elementary level. A true Leninist and devout Marxist, Lukács premised his policy on the need to destroy the family structure and the existential bonds that derive from that. Flagrant sexuality unchecked by morality or religion was understood by the precursor of the Frankfurt School, which came over to the United States and Columbia University in 1923, and its most influential mentor as a useful mode of forming communism's new man. So what is this new man and what should this new man look like? I don't know if you know, but many of you, if you followed my content, we've talked about Alfred Kinsey, we've talked about John Money. These were some of those who were very highly influential in pushing sexual deviancy and writing books and papers and trying to normalize a lot of the things that go on when it comes to sex. John Money, you guys know that he was very influential. He was the first doctor, I call him a mad scientist, who decided that, let's try this gender ideology thing. And because it's gender, it's just a social construct. You can pretty much make up in your mind whatever you want to be. So continuing on in Schilling's article, he says, sex education at schools has been refurbished. It is now about sexualization, hedonism, and the eroticization of childhood. With the loss of innocence, children will deviate from their parents' authority. The state and the teachers' union seek to become the overseers of American children. This feat was something Marxism always longed for. The Soviet Union, Communist China, Castro's Cuba, Pol Pot's Cambodia, 8 glaring examples of Marxist-Leninist projects to destroy the family and replace them with the state. Cultural Marxists today seek the exact same thing, except that the methodology has changed to weaponize sex. It comes disguised as basic educational courses, diversity, LGBTQ rights, and social justice idioms. So we see that people like George Lukács and Quisha, who were big on pushing this heavy sexualized child into mainstream, have become really successful. And upon looking at this further, I just want to show you guys some things. The reason why it's so important to note that it starts in the schools is because once these properly indoctrinated young people go out into society, they get their corporate jobs, and they further that thinking into whatever job that they do. Everyone has a worldview. And so when you have been indoctrinated, you're going to work out that worldview in whatever you do. So these indoctrinated children become adults, go work for people, become legislators, and then they execute their worldview into society. The reason that they want to do this is so when you become totally depraved, when you have no moral standing, especially when it comes around the idea of sex and a family, when you have totally ripped that foundational part of the family away, and now you're just looking at the pleasure part of sex, and you have a completely uneducated society, the goal is to completely confuse kids and totally weaken them and dumb them down to the point that where they are so completely dumbed down, they are completely easily controlled. That's the point.
This video was taken from the YouTube channels of Edmond North and Memorial, publicly posted footage of their students licking chocolate, peanut butter, and other condiments off feet and armpits, all during their week-long philanthropy events, known as Balto Week for Edmond North and Swine Week for Edmond Memorial. The most recent video is from 2020, but we found videos going back to 2015. We sent the video you just watched to Edmond Public Schools asking for their response. They noted the feet licking, quote, didn't happen this year, and the district spokesperson didn't respond directly.
Let's take a look at this Amaze video that we see. This is geared to kids. This has been played in schools. These are videos that are used to demoralize our children.
Queen to e4 and checkmate. I love playing with myself.
The changes that comes with puberty is that your body begins to produce more sex hormones. One of the results is that you may experience more interest and curiosity about sexuality.
So when we talk about Hollywood, so we say Hollywood, but we don't even really, I don't think we realize that these are just other corporations. Even with Nickelodeon and this documentary that has come out, Nickelodeon is owned by Paramount Disney. It's a corporation. Sean Diddy Combs. Diddy has Combs Global. These are corporations, and they have tremendous power to influence and push more sex into society and onto our children.
Masturbation is very common. People of all genders can masturbate.
Because we are constantly fed a diet of sex, drugs, and feel-good pleasure through social media, back in the day, I guess we could say TV ads, and still TV ads, and just it being everywhere around us.
There are no right or wrong ways to masturbate, but it should always be done in private. No matter what rumors you may have heard, there are no negative physical effects from masturbation. If a person finds that they are masturbating so frequently that it gets in the way of their normal daily...
It makes us completely jaded when we hear about allegations like Diddy. I mean, we've heard all of these things from Hollywood for so long. Like when we hear stuff like this, especially when it's geared towards children, when we hear about, Epstein and young children being violated, the border and the sex trafficking, and there is not a complete and utter revolt of society against the people who are not doing their job by not maintaining the border, not doing their jobs as adults in the education department, and those who are in the public schools and the teachers unions. When we don't have a revolt against this,
masturbation can be a way to relieve stress or learn about yourself, your body, and your feelings.
It becomes common. Oh yeah, that thing happened, and it's just not even that big of a deal. I mean, how many stories have you heard where there are teachers being arrested for violating students.
But generally, masturbation, even a few times a day, does not present a problem, and it is a physically safe way to express sexual feelings.
We just had a few here in Jacksonville. We see it all across the country, though. But where are the societal revolts? Where are they?
So you think an 8-year-old would be age appropriate to be reading about pornography and dirty magazines from school?
Yes.
As I was looking more into this, I came across a man, B.F. Skinner. He was a psychologist who did this experiment called operant conditioning. Operant conditioning occurs when a learner's behavior is followed by a consequence or reinforcement. So Skinner introduced a new term into the law of effect, reinforcement. Behavior that is reinforced tends to be repeated, strengthened. Behavior that is not reinforced tends to die out or be extinguished. We all also have a sexual component to our makeup as human beings. When the sexual component is activated, and we all understand what that means, but without the moral component to that, it can really turn a society on its head. When we have, again, many of these images that come in ads like this, I remember my mom telling me about when she was in a marketing class, how they had shown her an image of alcohol being poured over a glass of ice, and that there were images in the ice and the alcohol. That always kind of stuck with me. And one day, living in New York, I was on the train, on the subway, and I saw this poster of a Bacardi orange ad, and it had the alcohol pouring out over ice. And I don't know what it was, but something just prompted me to go and look, and the words of my mom came back to me, and I was like, I'm going to see if there's any images or anything in the ad. Within just a few minutes of looking at the ad, I was completely shocked. I saw all of these highly sexual, highly suggestive images in the ad. I took the ad out of its, the little covering or whatever, rolled it up, and took it home for further study because, well, I'm kind of a nerd. Upon even further digging, there were images of women's breasts out. There were images of men erect. There were images of sexually suggestive poses with the men and the women, with women and women. It was completely filled with sexual images embedded into the ice and the splashes and all of those kinds of things. I was like, am I tripping? I would show my friends, and sure enough, everyone could see it. So it wasn't just me. I wasn't just making this up. This was a real thing. And again, we've seen this with things like Disney. We've seen this with Jessica Rabbit. We've seen these highly suggestive, completely inappropriate displays of sex. And the reason why these are important to understand is because as we see these subliminal messages, it is reshaping your mind. It is reshaping how you think, which reshapes behavior, which gets you to more easily be persuaded to do things that those who are pushing the images on you want you to do, want you to think. And so the more I bring this up, because the more and more we see these things on Nickelodeon, the more and more we see these things in society, it just becomes very normal to us. When we saw this Dan Schneider guy from the Nickelodeon, who ran Nickelodeon, when we saw him in a hot tub with a teenage girl, he was fully clothed and she in a bikini, we should have been outraged. But because we have been primed so very well to just see sexual things and not think anything of it, even when it is directed towards children, we just move right along. Ariana Grande, we move right along. It seems to me that the social engineers are trying to use sex, push it upon children to create a positive reinforcement using pleasure-based sex. So in other words, they're trying to use that pleasure that comes with sex that is meant for adults, married adults. They are using the positive aspects of that for a positive reinforcement, therefore getting the children to want it more, to do it more, to be more inclined to participate, and therefore demoralizing children because there are no parameters around this. There are no boundaries to this. And as we can see, it just keeps going further and further and further. Where now in society, there is actually a term called MAPS. Now that we know how positive reinforcement works and why negative doesn't, we can be more deliberate and hence more successful in our cultural design. We can achieve a sort of control under which the controlled, nevertheless, feel free. They are doing what they want to do, not what they are forced to do. That's the source of the tremendous power of positive reinforcement. There's no restraint and no revolt. By a careful design, we control not the final behavior, but the inclination to behave, the motives, the desires, the wishes. The curious thing is that in that case, the question of freedom never arises. B.F. Skinner. Tyranny is not going to be overt. It is going to be a slow, long march through the institutions, which we have seen. However, if you continue to be silent, you will be taken over, just like those that we've seen in the past. It will be no different. When we have so many sexual deviants who are unashamedly targeting kids and there being no real consequences, what does that mean for kids coming up? What does that mean for adults today? Sex is being used as a reward, a positive reinforcement by those who seek to destroy America, to reinforce certain behaviors. And it's just one, although a very powerful one, used to put to sleep and continue to make subservient slaves who will mindlessly throw themselves off of a cliff for the illusion of pleasure, comfort, idleness, and the illusion of freedom. None are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. These types of things do not strengthen society. They weaken society. They deteriorate the moral fabric of our society. You think that they don't have any influence on you, but they absolutely do. And most importantly, on vulnerable children.